A young woman on a YouTube channel titled Rage After Storm did a video titled Race is Real. The anti-white thought police at YouTube yanked the video, presumably because it was effective, but I'm sure they put forward some other pretexts. However, before they were able to pull it down, a different YouTube channel titled Warski Live attempted a rebuttal, and so I don't have much time, but I want to address some of the inane points that these losers made.
Good.
What's up, dude?
I found this out through some black guy, Derek. You tweeted at Rage. She apparently made a really racist video, and you bashed her publicly.
The two guys on your screen, Andy and Chris, I believe the other guy's name is, they present themselves as impartial and fair.
This isn't to a fuck Rage stream.
But the use of the word racist demonstrates that they're anti-white. The word is used by anti-whites to demonize white people and to delegitimize arguments that serve the well-being of whites.
So I was like, wait, what the fuck's happening here? Watched her video, and Chris just watched it right now, and my God, this is probably some of the most racist shit I've seen in a while. And yeah, we're gonna be talking about her sources.
Look at how he's rubbing his hands together like a villain out of a movie, and that look on his face, like he's about ready to pounce on his white victim for daring to have an opinion that differs from anti-whiteism.
Kraut, you've been doing a lot of research on the sources. Thank you.
Not as much as I could have, but I've looked through the first basic articles.
This guy here, who goes by the name Kraut, is the in-house intellectual, which is really not saying much for this crew. Really, these are not serious people. This is your typical anti-white crew of pseudo-intellectuals, snarky juveniles, just totally inane. And you'll see in a minute that this Kraut character is about as sharp as a lobotomized mental patient.
So today we're going to be talking about what happened with Rage. And by the way, to everyone, I did invite her on the show. She politely declined because she's with her boyfriend or something. So
She's on vacation, I think.
Yeah. But to anyone who doesn't know who she is, we've had her on the show last month actually, and she was cool. And her videos are primarily sort of like what we do, you know, anti-SJW stuff, hitting race topics and all this. But this one went fucking off the rails of her discussing about how black people are born inherently with lower IQs.
All right, listen, anti-whites, your argument is not with this Rage person. Your argument is with science. The IQ issue has been resolved for many decades. There is no such thing as an IQ test that favors white people. Asians score slightly higher. There are IQ tests that don't incorporate mathematics or language. They're purely abstract, and they all arrive at the same conclusions. So your argument is with people like Dr. Helmut Newberg and Dr. Linda Gottfriedson and Charles Murray. Your argument is not with somebody like Rage. The research and the science, twins studies, it's all been done for decades now, and they continue to heap increasing amount of evidence on top of it.
Really nothing else to... The first article is just pure nonsense from top to bottom.
What's the title of the
tell the people.
The title. Okay.
Tell them where.
Alien Mind. Alien Mind. Black people have no conception of European morality.
And where did this article come from?
The Daily Stormer. But I think it is important to point out that if we're going to be, you know, honest, intellectually honest, we shouldn't just dismiss it by saying, oh, this is just a Daily Stormer, fuck it. We should actually read it, go into it, and look what their claims are, and then see. I mean, I've already read it, it's bullshit, but if you got to be honest, you can't just say, oh, she's an artist because she quotes the Daily Stormer. You have to actually look at it.
Listen to that fat, anti-white, pseudo-intellectual prig going on about intellectual honesty. Well, as this develops, you'll see how intellectually honest he is. You'll see that he's just another anti-white liar. In fact, we start off with a lie. This is the source list from Rage After Storm's video. As you can see, Alien Mind is not the first, but the third item on the list. As you will see, the anti-whites attempt to make the citations seem fewer than they are, and they also cherry-pick items that they think they can debunk and mock and ridicule and giggle at the way anti-whites do. I also want to point out that this Kraut prig said that we can't just call her a Nazi. We have to make it appear that we have read the sources that she has cited, and then we can call her a Nazi. Well, what kind of people throw around the word Nazi? Yep, anti-whites.
Well, it's not just that. But you also can't ignore the fact that there's a heavy or a huge bias where if that's where you're going to get your source of information from, if you enjoy reading the Stormer, there's
time to jump forward to some of their claims. I don't have all day for this.
Let's just start with it. Let's do it. Okay. Does everyone have an intuitive understanding of the golden rule?
Here's the first taste of this guy's intellectual honesty. He begins by attacking points in an article that are not, or that were not, arguments that Rage made.
Rule that forms the basis of all laws. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. It is tempting to think that everyone does, but is there any evidence to support this apart from just personal acquaintance with it? White Europeans have a history that is inseparable from this concept, and without it would never have been able to form the nations and empires that identify them throughout history. However, when you investigate African Negro psychology and history, you find that they had no knowledge of this law until white Europeans came and attempted to teach them of the benefits it would bring if they observed it. The thing about it is, its source... When you go to this article, its source is the Wikipedia article on the Golden Rule. You click on it, and the first thing you see is Golden Rule in Indian culture, Golden Rule in Hindu culture, Golden Rule in Arabic culture, Golden Rule in Islam, Golden Rule in China, Golden Rule in Taoism, Golden Rule all across the world, meaning essentially the Wikipedia article itself, what they use as a source, debunks their first claim.
Except it doesn't. In fact, here are the contents of that entire page. I'm not interested in whatever point the author was trying to make in that article. What I am interested in is that this Kraut individual is trying to rebut Rage by cherry-picking arguments out of an article, arguments that she didn't make, and then he lies about the sources in the article. So he's lying about Rage's sources, and he's lying about the sources in the article. He's saying that the source rebuts the article, when it clearly doesn't. The author was talking about the Golden Rule vis-a-vis black Africans.
Go fucking figure.
Fucking Kraut's always on it.
It's pure conjecture, nonsense. And besides all that, really, the Golden Rule, is the Golden Rule really everything that there is to European philosophy?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, there's no Descartes, there's no Popper, there's no Hayek. Karl Marx is also part of European philosophy, as much as you may not want it to.
And the black guy that goes by Some Black Guy makes a snide remark that the only philosophy that came out of Europe was the Golden Rule. And then this twit here claims that Marx is European. Marx was a Jew.
Right?
So what this essentially proves is that these people have a very narrow mind and absolutely no fucking understanding whatsoever of what European philosophy is. Maybe it's because European philosophers created our modern liberal society and they don't like that very much. That's my guess.
So the cultural degeneration and degeneration of Western civilization is the white man's fault. Got it.
Next phrase. The African Negro is unique for having based his entire economy on captive slavery as far back as we can tell. Okay, you go to the Wikipedia articles and you find that the first African kingdoms have their economy based on trade with metals, with gold, bronze, copper, and with salt.
Except no, you imbecile. There is no mention of copper or bronze anywhere in that article. Furthermore, there is no detailed examination of the first economies of countries or kingdoms in Africa. And moreover, the Wikipedia article is addressing the entire continent of Africa, which includes the Arabs to the north. The authors of the piece that you are butchering are specifically addressing black Africans. Could you be any more deceitful?
How could you read this and then think that? And that's what's troubling to me. That's what's troubling, you know, because, and just real quick, you know, before I found out about this stuff, and I had somewhat of suspicion because I was talking to Andy not too long ago saying that I caught like 10 minutes of a podcast she did. And she started talking about some stuff that was very like reminiscent to like race realism. And I was thought maybe she's just examining it. And I had to go. And I'm like, well, fuck it, whatever. And, you know, it just, yeah, this is full blown. And I don't know. I just found it so strange because I thought she was really chill person, very genuine. That's why a lot of people were very warm and inviting.
So when some black guy thought that she was anti-white, that made her chill, and that's why everyone was warm and inviting. Now all that has changed since these folks are clearly anti-white.
Her on her had her, she's been on multiple people's channels. She's genuine.
I had one moment, like I had the same feeling. She was chill, she was cool. When I interviewed last month,
I watched this one video of hers, and it just looks like she's just repeating what the Daily Stormer article says.
Except that she cites 9 other sources, including the Bell Curve, which is an erudite treatise on the subject of IQ and intelligence. And I assume this mental midget won't go anywhere near.
She just read the article, said, okay, this sounds right. Apparently didn't put any effort into questioning any of it, and then said, okay, this is how it is. The next paragraph, the last state in Africa to outlaw slavery did so within the last 10 years. Okay, that was Sudan. Sudan outlawed slavery in 2002. And the reason why they didn't outlaw slavery until 2002 was because Sudan is half Arab, half black. The Arabs are Muslim, kept Sharia law, and didn't abolish slavery because it was Islamic and enslaved the black people.
Wrong again. If that illogic were true, then that would mean all or most Arab countries would practice slavery, and they don't. Furthermore, slavery is still practiced in places like Sudan. They just have this pretense to banning it because it's what the white world wants to see happen. And what's more, Sudan is not composed of Arabs enslaving blacks. This is the current president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir. And here are other leaders of the Sudanese government, no doubt contemplating something profound. And finally, here we have the great Sudanese army.
Oh.
It's not because...
now we're treading into other territories here.
That's it. Is getting.
Holy shit.
And
let's continue. The next one is the best part of this article.
Oh, I can't wait.
This is so fucking... This is a 14-year-old trying to be condescending. When we think in words, and our language defines the limit of what we can think about. There are many words in different languages that cannot be accurately translated into another language, as they represent a unique thought process that is not replicated elsewhere. The English to Zulu language dictionary has only 250 pages, and like the other African Negro languages, does not include a working definition for any abstract concepts, as it is not possible for them to think that way. Okay.
You got me.
250 pages for dictionary is actually pretty decent.
I think that Kraut better start thinking about how to make the TH sound, because he has a bit of an issue. He also better do some more thinking on 250-page dictionaries being pretty impressive. To what? A first grade classroom?
Pretty decent. Then, second off, even if you don't have words in a language, you usually have that concept. For example, Schadenfreude does not exist in the English language, but you people still know what it is. Blitzkrieg. You people still know what Blitzkrieg is.
Oh, this is truly moronic, and this is their intellectual heavy hitter. He is comparing the lack of verbiage for abstract thought in Black African dialects to different words in European languages. The failure of Black Africans to create vernaculars for abstract thoughts is not explained away by saying that whites who speak different languages can understand each other's abstract thoughts.
Languages?
Yes.
Well, my girlfriend's pretty
Languages.
dumb, yeah.
Languages are learned. That's the most important part.
fucking insane.
Languages are learned.
Yeah.
You learn a...
Well, if you learn languages, then why didn't the language fairy give as many words to the Black Africans as they did to the Europeans? I mean, there's the real racist.
Learning. It's very easy to learn another language. Not necessarily that easy, but you can learn a different
It's
language.
easy enough. I mean, it's
Yeah,
easy enough to
exactly.
where you can get a fucking free app and I can start to learn some languages.
Wonder who invented the technology to have that free app to teach you some languages, and who invented those languages?
In her video, when she brought up this exact line you were talking about. She said, "How do Black people learn how to talk English then?" And she had like a reason. I can't remember. Can anyone remember?
Something colonial, probably. But the thing is,
This imbecile doesn't even know what she said because he's only pretending to rebut her video. He's busily cherry picking some article out of all of the sources that she cited. What she actually said was that European admixture had elevated Black African IQ by 15 points on average.
it's also a testament against this, that first of a third of the African population speaks Afrikaans, which is like a Dutch-German mix of a language. Then a lot more people speak French. Then people speak English. Most Africans probably speak up to 2-3 languages.
Okay, I don't even know if I can do this anymore. That was the most asinine statement he's made so far. A third of Africa does not speak Afrikaans. It takes 2 seconds to look up that the dominant language in Africa is English, with over 700 million speakers. Arabic is next, with over 150 million speakers. At a cursory glance, Afrikaans isn't even in the top 10 of languages spoken in Africa. And I would like to see his source for most Africans speaking 2 or 3 languages, as he likes to say.
The point I made to you in the Discord is that the entire American pulp culture music, everything that you can think of, comes out of the American South from the 60s, 50s, and 40s. Louis Armstrong, Ray Charles, Duke Ellington, James Brown, Chuck Berry. The list goes on and on and on.
Why the hell is he bringing this up? I mean, first of all, blacks are and have been located all over the United States for a very long time. Southerners, and when I say Southerners, I mean white people, Southerners in the South, unless transplanted, are only in the South. So could Southern music traditions have had any influence on the sounds that are coming out of the South? Could rich and powerful anti-whites who have made a tradition of lionizing and aggrandizing non-whites to the detriment of whites had anything to do with the celebrity of these individuals? But that's not even the point I wanted to make. The point I wanted to make is this anti-whites sycophantic fawning of blacks. The topic has nothing to do with musical traditions, but this guy still felt the need to tell us how much better blacks are than us. Typical anti-white.
I feel like the whole point is you're making this argument is just because areas have a lower IQ, then that's their genetics. That must mean on average, black people are not as smart as other people. I'm like, that like to me it's just like, okay. The most obvious fact here is, what about environmental? Yeah. Like just saying people grow up in different areas of the world with different resources under different social environments. Does that have anything else to do with it? Maybe. Like there's
Of course it does.
Of course it doesn't, Andy. Who creates the social environments? The people. Who exploits and maximizes the resources? The people. As usual, the anti-whites have it backwards. And take a close look at Chris. He is employing a long-standing and time-honored traditional anti-white argumentation tactic. Eye-rolling. For an anti-white, eye-rolling is insuperable.
Right? Of course it does. You take a black dude and you put him with, like, you know, a good a family with the parents intact, and, you know, they make a lot of money or decent amount of money. He'll grow up like that type of family.
Oh my God, this is embarrassingly stupid. Racial identifying markers such as IQ and proclivity to criminality run stable across all socioeconomic levels, as well as pious and libertine lifestyles. But let's set the settled and voluminous scientific data aside for a moment and just take Andy's argument at face value. He says that if you take an individual from a low IQ group and you put him with a good family, parents who are intact, and who make a lot of money or a decent amount of money, he's going to grow up just like them. Well, let me ask you, Andy, why is it that the individual from the low IQ group doesn't have a good family? Why doesn't he have parents who are intact and parents who make a lot or a decent amount of money? Could it be because his parents are also low IQ'd? Furthermore, if your argument was correct, which it obviously is not, it would mean that everyone who does not come from a good family, who does not have intact parents, and who doesn't have a lot or a decent amount of money would automatically have a low IQ, and we simply do not see that. The reverse would also imply that everyone who has a lot of money would have a really high IQ, and we don't see that either.
And you put them in like the hood with gang culture.
How do you think they're
gonna grow up like that?
Exactly.
Yeah. You take a white dude and put him in the same situation.
I could say the same thing about people in Fiji then and be like, there, Asians are stupid and less than everybody else. They're not as smart. Yeah. Well, no, because there's just no access to any fucking resources.
Again, who exploits and maximizes the resources? The people. And again, why is it that in first world countries where all races have access to identical resources that we still see proclivity to criminality and IQ scores holding steady?
Like what bothers me the most is how, like, say she released this and thought there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and like how she can, like, we can still be completely chill, we can be completely cool. Like,
everything these anti-whites are saying belie their claim of impartiality. They're clearly anti-white. I mean, just look at what they're saying. This guy says that she said these things and thought there was nothing wrong with it. Well, of course she thought there was nothing wrong with it. You're saying that you're impartial and you're here to share ideas, nothing more. And he also says how she thought that we would still be chill. Well, you claim that you will still be chill, that you allow people to have different perspectives, but you clearly don't. If someone is not anti-white like you, then you demonize them as a Nazi and a racist.
I have no problem with her just, you know, being like, say, I had a good conversation with Nathan D'Amigo, that fucking identitarian white nationalist.
Oh yes, the phrase "that fucking identitarian white nationalist" just rings of impartiality and fairness.
You know, but I'm like, all right, well, I don't give a fuck about his ideology. You know, it's interesting to know what he thinks. And this shit, I feel like she like fucking hid it from me. Like she didn't, or hid it from all of us essentially.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
How could she be hiding it from you? What are you saying? She has held unpardonable opinions, and she has been hiding them from us. There should be retribution. This is the anti-white mindset. Look at how grave they've all become. Look at their faces. Just at the mere thought that she was holding opinions that weren't anti-white.
No, so like she sends this tweet out: the skeptic community are so triggered over my recent videos. Take the red pill, goddammit. What are you? Like the problem here, the problem here is that race realism is actually really fucking pervasive.
Because it's based in science.
Stefan Molyneux fucking talks about this shit all the time, and he talks out of his fucking ass constantly. Constantly. He misrepresents the fucking data. Did
this nose-ringed imp just disparage Stefan Molyneux for bringing on academicians of the highest caliber and arriving at conclusions that differ from anti-white ideology?
These are people, and what's so fucking obnoxious about this is I made 2 videos about race realism. These people fucking followed me for 6 months, making sock accounts just so they can get around me muting them, being like, why aren't you debating this? There's no fucking debate, you
To be honest.
There's no debate, says the anti-white who claims impartiality. You must, look into his eyes, you must agree with anti-white ideology or you are an evil Nazi racist.
That sounds like a petulant... I saw that tweet. I just retweeted it under the caption 9. Just the audacity to say, take the fucking red pill, goddammit. What are you, a 15-year-old child?
Yeah, I hate this
are
red
you
pill
sad that
shit.
you're not the little
I think
princess
she's
you
young,
wanted
though.
to be?
No, she's not the little princess, fatso. You are the little princess, especially when your girlfriend is pegging you.
I think she's really young. I think she's 18 or 19 years old.
Yeah, she's 19.
But that's still,
Yeah,
but
but
that's
that's
still,
not
you're
stuff.
fully cognitive. You are able to make rational decisions, and this just definitely was not one of them.
Right, and she just spread the idea to 80,000 people.
And now we get to the crux of their rage. Too much data that undermines anti-white ideology has reached too many people.
At it.
Well,
well
you're saying
read it.
this now, but there are legitimately segments in the alt-right who believe that Egyptians were white.
Oh, well,
I'm not making this up.
Again, but that's alt-right people. So you got to take that. You got to accept them for what
That's
they are.
just a red pill.
Yeah.
It's not only segments in the alt-right that think that, fatso. It's also scientists at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History. They conducted the first study to establish a proper genetic database to study the ancient past. Now keep in mind that in today's anti-white dystopian climate, scientists are deathly afraid of revealing their findings and revealing facts when those facts undermine and contradict the anti-white narrative. They get attacked by their peers, they get attacked by their students at their universities, they get attacked just like this rage woman is being attacked by these losers. They don't get funding for their projects, they face demotion, they don't get promoted. This is the reality. Actually, and just also to say, when they espouse anti-white beliefs, they are often promoted, celebrated, find themselves on the cover of Scientific American. And they find themselves there even if they had to fabricate data to arrive at anti-white conclusions, even if they blatantly torture the process to arrive at anti-white conclusions. All of that's just swept under the rug. So the tip here, the best place to put your money, is that when any scientific data surfaces that contradicts or undermines the anti-white narrative, you can bet that the truth goes further than what those scientists are willing to reveal. Okay, so this is from the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History website. Quote, the study found that ancient Egyptians were most closely related to ancient populations in the Levant, and were also closely related to Neolithic populations from the Anatolian Peninsula and Europe, end quote. By the way, I'll just point out that the Anatolian Peninsula is bordered by the Caucasus Mountains. Caucasian? Quote, the data shows that modern Egyptians share approximately 8% more ancestry on their nuclear level with sub-Saharan African populations than with ancient Egyptians, end quote. So, broadly speaking, Egypt became blacker than it was, and it is not what it used to be. And it gets worse for these losers. New DNA testing on 2,000-year-old elongated Paracas skulls changes known history. Paracas, by the way, for you anti-white retards, is in Peru, which is down in South America. Now a second round of DNA testing has been completed, and the results are just as controversial. The skulls tested, which date back as far as 2,000 years, were shown to have European and Middle Eastern origin. These surprising results change the known history about how the Americas were populated. These findings are consistent with the fact that many of the mummies of the members of the ruling classes of these ancient civilizations have red and blonde hair. We even see this in China, where the Chinese mummies, people who the Chinese said brought them sciences, had red and blonde hair.
Yeah. You guys remember Django? Did you see that movie?
Yeah. I love Django. That was a great movie.
I wonder why these people who are impartial and definitely not anti-white loved that movie.
Do you like the bounty hunting business? Kill white folks and they pay you for it? What's not to like? I like the way you die, boy.
Childhood nutrition has a lot to do with IQ. Chris, you brought that up with like Japanese people and sushi omegas or whatever.
Well, yeah, your diet. Well, like as you grow, if you're giving your body good food, it's gonna function better, especially your brain.
Bearing in mind that human beings are animals, whether you believe that we have spirits or souls or not, we're still animals. So bearing in mind that we are animals, and as animals we are extremely resilient, especially when we're talking about genetic resiliency, so that in the face of famines, we are able to achieve or nearly achieve our potentials. If we weren't able to do so, we wouldn't be here today. So, but bearing that in mind, it's true that diet can play a role. For example, if an individual was extremely malnourished, he or she may fail to reach his or her genetic potential. However, the studies are not focusing on individuals, but entire groups of people. So you have entire groups of people on different continents, in different situations, social situations, etc., at different levels of wealth, different levels of nourishment, and their IQ scores are stable. Moreover, if we take Chris's argument at face value, we would have to conclude that the more food that someone is given, the more intelligent they would become. The more food that someone is given, the taller they would become. And that is simply not the case. you can severely, and when I say severely malnourish, I mean showing the ribs and all, which doesn't happen in America with all of these taxpayer-funded programs to feed children in the mornings, feed them at lunch, feed them at nights. So this sort of malnourishment is not happening in Western countries, nor is it happening in any of the other industrialized nations, nor is there a disparity in the blood panels among the races. We don't see one race having lower vitamin and mineral levels than another, and therefore explaining why one race has a lower or higher IQ than the other. I mean, how would you explain how, in this case we're talking about blacks, how is it that they are malnourished and therefore unable to achieve the IQ scores of the average IQ scores of whites, but they're still able to run a 10-second 100-meter dash? How would you explain, with omega-3s being infused into many foodstuffs over almost 2 decades now, milk, eggs, cereal, etc., how would you explain that the lack of omega-3s is responsible for their failure to reach their intellectual potential, but they're still able to grow 7 feet tall? I mean, Chris, don't you realize that if they were malnourished enough to retard their intellectual development, that would express itself in every other aspect of their bodies?
Well, even from an evolutionary perspective, genes, only function within an environment. I told you that before. It's if you have
Jesus, that is a stupefyingly absurd statement. Of course, genes function inside environments. Where else, if not inside environments? This guy right here is what smart looks like to stupid people.
have a cactus, for example. It has the genetic makeup of a cactus, and you put it into a desert, it will prosper perfectly. If you put it into a completely different environment, it will not prosper. Genes are made for certain environments.
Right.
If you don't have the right environment, something will not work. So even if race realism is correct, it is more of a question of the environment than of merely the genetic makeup.
Yes,
But
exactly.
also too, it's like
Oh, that's so sad that Andy just shouted exactly at the non-point that the beached whale just made. It just shows that Andy has no intellectual depth or ability to think for himself whatsoever. Yes, cacti in the desert will prosper, but that is totally irrelevant. What is relevant, though, is that there is a type of cactus called the hedgehog cactus. Now, that cactus only grows 12 inches tall. There's another type of cactus called the elephant cactus, and that will grow 63 feet tall. Now, what's the difference? They're both in the desert. They both are in the exact same environment. I thought environment was what was the predominating and most influential factor. To parallel the subject a little more closely, let's talk about dogs. Dogs prosper when they're put into the family home. So why is it some dogs are small and other dogs are large? Chihuahuas are tiny, Great Danes are enormous. Ah, but you say they're different breeds. Well, you need to realize that both breed and race are subsets of the superset species. So yes, Kraut, cacti prosper in the desert, and they don't do well under, say, hydroponic conditions. You are absolutely brilliant.
The genes are genetic makeup. It's a plastic that you put, it molds around an environment. It shapes itself around the environment. The environment impacts the genetic makeup. Epigenetics is what it's called. Okay, thank you, love. It's called epigenetics. Okay.
thank you, girlfriend.
Damn, her girlfriend's fucking all smart too.
Oh Lord, this is getting hard. My vicarious embarrassment for these people is getting tough for me to tolerate. Epigenetics is a branch of study that is examining tiny changes in a phenotype, I think is what it is, without changing the genotype. So these are like dormant genes that, when given certain stimulus, awake and activate something in the body, and when the stimulus isn't present, the genes are not active. These are tiny changes when juxtaposed to the underlying architecture. I mean, this in no way validates a notion that major changes take place in an organism when the environment changes. They would like epigenetics to mean that there would be major transformations in an organism because they want to believe that you can take an individual and just put him into an improved environment and radically change who and what he is, rather than saying that who and what he is ultimately determined by the core architectural structure of his DNA. Furthermore, if genes were merely a plastic that molded to their environment, that were determined by their environment, why is it that whites who are born in South Africa and in Zimbabwe, why is it that they don't revert to a state more reminiscent of black Africans?
If you're going to look for savagery, you can find it pretty much everywhere in the world.
Any race, Genghis Khan. Fuck, god damn it.
How amusing. They're talking about black violence in that article, and these anti-whites ride to the defense of blacks by saying all races commit violence. I wonder how often they do that when they're talking about white violence.
Well, all I'm going to say was that not the entire area of Africa has developed. So there is an average of more horrible things happening. That's just because the West has developed.
Yep, you caught us. The development fairy gave us civilization, and that racist fairy didn't visit Africa.
Yeah,
one thing that I think a lot of people never talk about is, like, say, when we talk about the environment, we actually talk about weather, like, say, the harshness versus, like, say, places where it's like pretty average and it doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold, and you're able to flourish in those areas. Like, if you look at a continent, you look at Australia, say, everybody lives on the fucking coast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody lives on the coast. You look at Africa, it's a giant fucking continent. And
yeah, it's a giant continent. If only it had coasts like Australia for people to live on.
a lot of it is fucking terrible to live in. And it's very hard to fucking thrive.
All right, this guy just ceded that black Africans didn't develop civilization at all, and he blames it on the harshness of the environment. So the question is, if the environment was uninhabitable, why didn't any of them get the idea to move to a more habitable location? I mean, even the gazelle move on when there's no more grass to eat or no more water to drink. They don't just squat and wait for grass to grow and the water to fall out of the heavens. And besides, civilization was built in the harshest regions of Africa as soon as the white man got there.
Like, say, you look at Western Europe. Yeah, you look at Western Europe. A lot of it actually, it's not so bad. It allows you to work.
That is absolute genius. What a brilliant insight that was. In Europe, we don't have bad winters. Honey just falls from the trees. It's all the environment. It has nothing to do with who we are. It's just the environment gives us everything. We have an environment fairy, a civilization fairy, a culture fairy. It's all given to us. Never mind the fact that even with modern agricultural science, the growing season in Europe and Western Europe is roughly 5 months. In ancient times, the growing season was even shorter, and in antediluvian times, it was even shorter. Now we can contrast that with Africa, where in many places the growing season is year-round. But of course, it requires that you invent agriculture and you invent irrigation.
And Trout is like amazingly demolishing this.
Amazingly demolishing what? His couch? It's been an hour and a half. I can't take any more of this. Gone.